dreary. It's dreary now.
It's just a little bit, yeah.
My sister lives in London, so I might be visiting her at the end of this month.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we allow people into the UK again.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I want to see my sister.
Well, yeah, you don't get 10 days at Heathrow Airport, which is used to be the scheme.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can just walk straight through the terminal.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Javier, are you also coming to visit us soon? You're on mute. Then you're on mute, Javier.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, I was saying that we're about to start. It's the time already. We will have 45 minutes ahead of us just to discuss the topic at hand, which is the future of cybersecurity education. But first, let me introduce our panelists. We have Dana Berman, who is a business development team lead at MIND, which is Checkpoint's Learning and Training Division. Dana's team is in charge of over 100 partnerships with academia, non-governmental organizations, and cyber education organizations. And Dana lives in 4 continents and speaks 4 languages. And currently, she's dreaming to learn Mandarin. Also, so do I. Please welcome as well Dr. Christopher Richardson. He's the Director of Education at Soteria CPG. He has more than 20 years of success managing and directing information security initiatives and expertise in awareness, training, and educational aspects of information assurance, enterprise risk management, artificial intelligence architecture, operational security, IT governance, and cybersecurity, of course. And last but not least, Mark Wellings from Simpire, who has an extensive career with leading international high-tech companies, which IBM or Checkpoint, among others, with a proven track record of exceptional performance and results, and has always understood that technology in and of itself is not the answer. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us during this panel discussion. And let me launch straight ahead the first question for you. How has cybersecurity education evolved in the last few years? Maybe, Doctor, is a question for you.
Right. I suppose the biggest involvement is it's moving very rapidly online. COVID has been a force multiplier when it comes down to the need to go on an online environment. The demand for cybersecurity has increased. The demand for commercial demand for cybersecurity is exponentially increased over the last few years. So it has to go online because the colleges and universities can't deliver the amount of people we need trained and educated in cyber. And I say that word train because a lot of people will do this one course, 10 years later do another course. Training is lifelong. It's a continuous process. But that's because cyber is a continuously evolving environment. What we were thinking of tackling 10 years ago is not what we're seeing today. And what's going to come tomorrow, nobody really knows. So yeah, it's an evolving market, it's an evolving environment. It's growing. The roles and number of roles in cyber is increasing. For careers, you can start in one area of cyber and end in a wholly different spot over a course of 10 years. So it is a very, very big and global picture. And I think that's the other thing people got to realize. It is truly global. So you can learn cybersecurity and deliver your expertise in one country from another country. You don't have to be, in the office in London or New York or somewhere else. You can be anywhere in the world to offer your expertise to support corporate or government or other agencies. And I think that's the other beautiful thing about cybersecurity. It's one of those hybrid jobs you can do pretty well from your own desktop and be an active part of a bigger team, a global team. So yeah.
Okay, I was muted. So we have seen a huge increase in cyber attacks since the outbreak of COVID-19. Study says that it has increased more than 300% than the previous years. Has it affected cybersecurity programs or curricula as well? Not only the victims of these cyber attacks.
Right. Well, yes. So it's one of those interesting things. So we've got around about what 6 billion people who are online right now, one way or another. You've got an attack vector that's changing because the vast majority of internet traffic today is delivered via mobile device. So there's going to be more interesting things. We got a more Internet of Things going on online, so robotics and other sensoring devices. So there's a lot more devices online. As you know, we're talking what 9 to 1. So there's 20, 30 million devices out there, and there's more to come. So there's a bigger market. That means our landscape is huge, and to protect every part of that landscape is beyond us. You know, it's beyond anybody and everybody right now. So what we've got to do is start focusing on what we need to really protect and protect that well. So yes, there will be an increase in the number of hits on devices and environments, but are those going to be detrimental to the internet? And that is the key to the whole problem. If we start seeing the crime wave being too big, then people will come off the internet. And that's not what we want. At the end of the day, we want a community online. And we want them to be safe and secure. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. And we need more people to help protect the internet in its shapes and sizes, and whether it's an application environment or a domain or whatever else we're trying to protect. So we need more people to understand what cyber risks are, so they can take the right and necessary appropriate action to their environment, and a better understanding across the whole of the users across the internet that this environment can be detrimental to their environment, their own personal environment, if they don't do basic cyber hygiene. And that's part of the education I think we need to bring into the schools, and it's happening. You know, we're looking at Generation Z. Most of them really understand the cyber domain. May not quite understand how to protect themselves though. So we've got to get that message over to them.
And I can share that on the company level, what we see is that there is a much more understanding in the different layers of education that you need to offer within your organization. It is no longer just an expert level or just a specific role level. It is the understanding that each person in the organization have the opportunity or risk to affect the security of the company. So we see more security awareness skills, understanding of basic cybersecurity terminology, understanding what an attack looks like, simulations of different attacks, to give our employees and the people in our communities the ability to understand and prepare. And if we see that they don't understand necessarily how to handle it, we can provide the relevant training. So we definitely see this is something that affects the plan of the training. Even planning training is something that is increased significantly. We see a lot more people coming into the workforce. We need to implement a lot more training very fast. We need to invest in each person individually to the level of their need. We also see something very interesting about on-demand training. We see attacks that have a huge impact, like a Mitra attack, and the next day you already need to develop and deliver a certain type of education about it, because people need to learn and understand how to handle it if we talk about the specific expert to that area. So what we see is the understanding of companies, the training is not a privilege, it's a must, it's an ongoing journey. And you have to invest in it for the entire organization. And B, that you need to understand how to provide relevant training for each individual on your organization so they can help protect it in the level that they are exposed to.
Right, Mark, do you want to add anything?
Hang on. Mute. Good about that. Actually, I was going to go back to sort of the beginning, the evolution of the cybersecurity, and Dan has kind of said a lot of words there, which there's a lot of it's important. I think the one thing that is across the board is the growth, right? The explosion, the number of people that have been, I use the word grudgingly, dragged into the cybersphere because they feel they want to or because they have to. Very often we find someone who was a very different occupation several weeks back, several months back. Now they're working in cybersecurity. So the way that we go about trying to train and educate has to be very different from people who, let's say, had that discipline from the beginning, right? So we have to really go back to grassroots in some cases. And that kind of makes me think, and perhaps many other people, that the place to start isn't at the corporate level, but it's really at the same word again, grassroots level, where we need to get the minds and hearts of the next generation, not just to understand the risks, but to a word I like to use, to care about these risks that actually affects their life. Why should I care about this app that I'm downloading? It's just a game after all. We need them to understand that there's a lot more behind that than just a game. So I think it's important just to recognize the huge increase in the number of people that need to be trained, educated, pick your words. The content needs to be accessible for them, needs to be available, and needs to be applicable. Maybe it's a bit early for AAA, but we do need to have that kind of approach so that everybody who has that interest can take part.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we all agree that there's a lack of professionals, or there's a lot of people that is needed or required in cybersecurity industry. What would be the factors that will make the general population care about cybersecurity, or how can we attract those professionals to become cybersecurity professionals?
So I think it's an answer on several levels. I'll say it's one of the focuses of my team, because personally I think it's fascinating. It's no longer a world where only the professionals have the power, but each person in our population, the second you have access to something connected to the internet, you can affect your household, your company, whatever it is. I think the first thing is really that we have to go in the discussions beyond the result discussion. We usually either talk about the disaster that happened, right? Major hack, major impact, stopping a train station from working, affecting a hospital, or a victory. We managed to do A, B, C. We prevented a huge threat, but really this is the end result. No one knows what happened, how it happened, what can lead to it, and how we can stop it. We need to include the curriculum in the very young age, understanding of cybersecurity. And obviously we're not going to teach necessarily, IoT advanced hacking course to a 6-year-old, but we need to start talking about awareness at a very young age. We need to start the second that they can hold a laptop, they need to understand what it means. Most of them start at 3, so maybe 3 is too soon, but 6, let's say. We need to do it modified based on group and knowledge, have localization. I think a lot of the content right now, some companies have localization and we have partners that do that. A lot of the content is in English. The majority of the world is still at least bilingual, and if not just another language. So we need to have the ability to help people learn at a very young age. It needs to be a focus of large organizations, of governments, to have that access to this content. We take it very for granted that we speak English and we can access and learn about the content, but the 6-year-old need to have it in their own language, in a channel that they can connect to and that they understand, with figures that deliver this type of messaging, someone that they can relate to. And it's really like people think today about how a TV show or how a Netflix or whatever show would match their crowd. We need to think how our cyber education speaks to our crowd. And once we build this can be an ongoing curriculum. So at some age you enter cyber gaming, and then you enter real life scenarios, and you give them the opportunity to understand what it is in every step of the way as they grow older and can be more responsible to how they affect the environment that they're in.
Well, cyber is taught from, at primary level. And that goes back to what you've already said. You know, a 2-year-old is using a mobile phone today. You know, you can't believe what they can do at, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5. So by the time they got to school, they're already educated with the devices they want to use and tend to use. So when they get into a school environment, you know, their curiosity needs to be excited, and they need to develop that curiosity. Coding, you know, basic coding to a 5-year-old is essential, because by the time they're 18, they really need to understand the whole complex of what an artificial and machine learning environment is going to be, because by the time they're 18, it's going to be part of their job. So I think that's where, you know, the World Economic Forum is saying there's about 1.5 billion people in the next 5 years need to be re-educated. So it's not just the education of our children and their development program. It's the 40-year-olds who are going to need a re-education, the 30-year-olds who need a re-education, and even the graduates just leaving university will probably need an education in the next 5 years, because it's a consistently changing environment. So from an education point of view, we've got a lot of problems to resolve about how do we get STEM subjects, not just cyber, but the whole of the STEM environment, and how do we get that across in an easy, digestible method? And that's where we got to start looking away from the classroom, flip the classroom and start asking, what is it? So yeah, we can do it from games platforms, we can do it for simulators, we can do it through virtual machines of one form or another. And that will open up a whole market. But this is an expensive market. If you go into Disney and ask them how much it takes to produce 10 minutes of a digital film, and we're asking to deliver 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes of a digital classroom, there is a difference here. We cannot produce the quality and the standard of a Disney film in the classroom. We don't have the money to do that. So that we've got to look at the ways, better ways to use technology to improve the classroom experience in an online environment. And that means we've got to engage with peer-to-peer chat rooms and understand how that can be facilitated and where the arguments can be put forward and discussed in a rational way. We've got to be able to bring games that are educational and not there for an enjoyment exercise, though putting the two together is the done thing. We've got to make cyber cool in that respect. We got to want people wanted to understand what security and safety online is all about. And I think that's a big issue globally. You know, how can I work in an environment that is safe and of course secure? We want them to do, we want them to enjoy their environment, enjoy their space, enjoy the rooms they're at. So we've got to start looking at better ways of getting that across a global population in multiple languages. You know, I'm looking forward to seeing where AI can do in real-time translation. So if I speak in English, everybody can hear it in their whatever language they want to hear it and understand. Right now, there's a question about the nuance of the English language to many people. So there we go. I think we look at Chinese, English, and Spanish as being essential. You know, and then you can say the Italians, the French, the Germans, the languages are equally getting out there as well, and the Russian and Arabic, and you know, and it just goes on and on and on. But when you look at the proportion of people that speak English, Chinese, and Spanish on the internet, it is a huge number. So we've got to start looking at delivering courses in those 3 languages today. And we're a long way behind that curve. And we've got to be more structured. So UNESCO has got a whole thing about sustainability of education. We've got to be buying into that and making it sustainable across the world in a digital world. And that's something where you've got to get into as well. So there's a lot to do. And here's the killer. We've got a very short window to do it in. You know, 5 years, educate 1.5 billion new people is a lot of work. You know, the education industry's got to wake up. It's good to see governments are waking up to it. I'm talking to quite a few. I'm sure everybody else is listening to their local environments where there's a big drive to get education and cyber education on the list. But that, I think, also includes mathematics, physics, chemistry, and all the rest of the STEM subjects as well. We need them all. You know, we look at, 3.5 million vacant jobs in cyber. Well, I think there's about 4 or 5 million vacant jobs in physics. There is vacancies, a lot of them.
But Chris, if it hadn't been for COVID, and maybe this is contentious, the classroom would, the classroom style would still be predominantly in use. It took COVID to push people into, let's say, a slightly less comfortable zone than they were in terms of both training in the professional world and in the academic world. Because prior to COVID, everyone was, I'll rock up to a class and I'll learn something. Not everyone, but that was the vast majority of training. CBT came around, 20, 30, I don't know, 4 years, I don't remember when. Forgive me, I don't, timings. And it's been around forever, but it was never really well adopted. Is that because it's not as good as Disney? Could well be. We've been spoiled with quality content for a long time, despite it not being, of the education side. So if it wasn't for, for COVID, and obviously COVID's done a lot of damage in it as well, but we would still be, in my opinion, struggling with this change that has to be made. We wouldn't have had the impetus to start the online, the virtual, the gaming, the cyber, the AI, everything that we've talked about. We haven't talked about machine learning as part of that as well, but we would still be, I think, slightly in the dark ages because everybody has been comfortable with that approach until now. So I like to take the good out of what we've seen here with this pandemic and say, if it wasn't for that, we'd still be struggling quite a lot more.
Well, I agree with you there. I was looking at mobile learning in the late 2017-18. I started looking at it, and it was a problem trying to get corporations to understand that that you need to get learning onto a mobile device. So yeah, I totally agree. COVID has made that so much more easier to articulate in the boardroom. But then again, cyber is very difficult to articulate in the boardroom. So there is an issue in that whole space. I think the fact that the boardrooms had to be Zoomed or Teamed or webcast in one form or another has helped a lot, but it's also hindered. If you look at the university students who've had to suffer their lectures online for 2 years, they're not impressed. The learning management systems were clunky or next to useless, or the professors and the teachers don't know how to use the digital world. Lots of reasons to say, they're glad to get back to the classroom. And the reality is, I'm going back to them saying, well, no, that's not where we wanted them to be. We want them to be glad to go online. And I think that's a problem we've missed with COVID. We were so focused on, the populations and the public health issue that we were forgetting what education was doing. My country really, really got that wrong in lots of ways.
All we did though was say to the teacher, here, your class is no longer in front of you, they're at these screens.
Yeah.
And we didn't prepare or equip or anything the people who are in charge of education with this whole new medium. As you said, they're not skilled in Zoom or whatever it might be. And forget the technical issues. I know, and I freely admit, when I'm in a meeting on Zoom, the distraction, the ability to be distracted is 100-fold than if I'm in a room with someone else. Yeah. And we have to somehow, in our Zoom meetings and in whatever we do online to try and push knowledge, somehow we have to say, I know that the person at the end of that screen there is likely to be distracted. How do I maintain their attention without taking my clothes off and scaring them, whatever it might be.
Well, I think that brings into what started to take off in the States back in the late 2007-8 with the nano learning, the micro sessioning. We've got, we know people's attention to detail laxes after a very short period of time. Learning has to be in episodes, and the episodes have to be short. And I think that's the key to the thing. You need to be able to stream simultaneously the different ways people learn. This is the other problem about digital education. It's not very good for a diversity of learning. People with special education needs, so assumes great unless you're blind, and then, or deaf, or both, but then, there's people out there who've got that problem. Keyboards are useful for some people, but not for those who can't actually access the keyboard itself, and it goes back to what I say about mobile phones. Most people don't have access to a computer or a PC or a pad. They've got a mobile phone. How do you get enriching digital content that engages the student, gets them to learn, and be able to assess them on a 4x4-inch screen? That's
a challenge.
That is about, well, you've got to, because 54% of the world's population access the internet by their mobile phone, and you can, because you change the medium. Don't go video, go podcast. That is part of it. New games machine. If they've got a PlayStation console, make the education system adapt to the console environment. This is about, you don't have to deliver the same content using PowerPoint. You can go down many different mediums simultaneously and get the same message over, but it has to be built that way. And that's the problem about education. It's built one way. There's a lesson plan. It's delivered, per se, Zoom with a PowerPoint or something like that.
That's because how they were taught, and the generation before them was taught like that as well.
Yeah.
Hey, it's always worked.
Yeah, and now
we've got to learn that.
But we need to consider that now we have so many different channels that people acquire knowledge from. It's no longer just a classroom or just a book. It's the social media. It's different sites on the internet. We need to meet people where they hang out. I think a lot of the struggles that the companies have is that they all want to bring people to their platform, but there are already so many platforms that are strong and solid and have very specific definitions of how to use them, like Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, for Z and millennials, and Facebook for other generations as well. We need to be able to just understand that there is already a playground that exists and is solid and holds most of the population that uses it as Dr. Christopher said, 54% through mobile. So we need to build our experience around that, but we can definitely use social media to leverage, and so we are able to get all these people in and communicate in their channels, not create additional platforms or additional classrooms. Maybe that's not necessarily the place. Maybe we need to all go to the main channels and work from there.
Well, I agree with that. And also we got to create digital content that is multi-sided. So it's got to have visual content. Yeah, of course it does. But it's also got to have oral. It's got to have read-write. It's still important, for people to read and write their environment as a way of self-education. We got to open the chat rooms. We got to have peer-to-peer social engagement. We got to have bring in, funny and all thing, the logistic issues, structured coding. Why do we do it the way we do it? And we also got to be able to allow people to pick and choose what type of medium they want at that time of engagement. So if you're traveling from A to B, you don't want a video channel because it's pretty useless, but you don't mind having a podcast which can keep with you. And especially if you're driving, of course. So there is all sorts of things you can do, but the games world has proven to, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we can bring in micro-accredited nano sessions that will allow students to pick up things. And often you think about it, if you suddenly say, well, what's ransomware? If you had the lesson already on your system, and just stream it in when you want to learn that particular problem, that helps. And if you have it layered in the educational layers, I want to know what the basics about this, so I'll go for a level 1 type of course. If I really want to know what the real ins and outs of it, I'll go for a level 7 type course. You can pick and choose where you want to come and take that level. And that will allow people to articulate their own professional and personal development, and they can work it out how they want to take it on. And from our point of view, from an education point of view, anybody that's learning at any time is a good thing. You know, that's the real thing about it. And that any time, any place, any person is where a sustainable education has to go to. And I think that's where we've got to start looking at it. And I think the big problem in that space is going to be assessment. You know, how do we do metacognitive assessment processes?
I think there is a step before that, and maybe we overlooked, or I certainly don't think we talked about it much, which is what is going to compel somebody, you know, to go ahead and say, well, I want to know about this thing, right? You talked about making it cool. That's really important. It's got to be relevant. But if I'm not interested in anything like that, why would I even, you know, spend my TikTok hours on that instead of watching how to make a cake or whatever it is that does interest me? I think there's that whole part of it isn't cool. You know, it's these, I don't know if you've seen the South Park show where they have them sitting in a basement playing this game, and they get food in tubes. You know, they're basically sustained by other people. That's the image that people have, and they don't like, generally speaking, I'm not saying it's for true, but that's what people think when they think of cyber, you know, geeks essentially. And I think what we need, certainly in my, where I see it, if somebody doesn't really care, I can give them as much awareness, as much training, you know, as much exposure to all of that. And at the end of the day, if the example I use is if somebody clicking on a link in an email doesn't actually impact them, or they don't understand the impact to the business and they don't care, I'm not going to succeed with my efforts, you know, no matter how good the quality is and accessible and so on.
Well, yeah, but let's get into reality as well. You know, we're never going to get school children for a long time leaving the classroom. You know, our society is based on that children go to school. And you know, doesn't matter how digitally smart we get for the next 5-10 years, children are still going to go to school to learn. So or not. But as the case is, what we've got to do is start in that space and get them engaged. Now later on, it's a lot easier. You know, I can talk to a whole bunch of 16-year-olds and infuse them to come into cyber, because there's a career in that. There's a way, there's a pathway, there's a career pathway, and we can map that whole out. And it doesn't have to be, you know, I'm the geek who can write the next application. It can be somebody who knows how to manage those geeks, who can manage the application. So there's a whole spectrum of skills. You know, I'm constantly fascinated with digital art, what these graphic designers can do today, and how they can manipulate and generate a digital environment. Is, you know, any child that's gone into graphic arts has enjoyed it. I've taught, you know, 5-year-olds how to use, you know, generate an animated GIF, and you only need to show them once, and they're off. You know, so you know, so the curiosity is there in the younger. What we've got to do is maintain that curiosity. And the one thing education tends to do is, over the period of time, it puts the pupils off. They don't want to learn anymore. So the 5-year-olds are really good, and the 15-year-olds just want to get rid of it all. They don't want any more of it. They've had enough. And I think that's where we've got to re-engage at the end of the secondary and then into the higher education side, and say, right, there is careers. This is where the jobs are. This is where where the Gucci stuff is. And therefore, this is what you need to do, because you're not going to get a job unless you can do this, this, and this. And I think that's the rationale in the younger generation. Now, the 30-year, 45-year-olds who have to learn the new digital world, because that's the world that automation is driving into them, one form or another, that's a wholly different ballgame. That's survival. You know, they have a cost of living, and they have their own family environments, their own career structures. They need to know how to adapt to a new world, and that is harder for them, because they've never had to learn digital the way it's pushed to them today. And so we've got to go back and say, right, how do we get adult education better? because there's going to be there's a bigger demand for that than there is in schools. Schools is easy compared to adult education. And that is where we really have our problems today. In 10 years' time, we won't have that problem. It will be a different set of problems. But right now, our next 10-year focus is adult education, because they're the ones that are needing it today, and they have the least desire to understand the word cyber. I think cyber has killed so many conversations, So we've got to start talking about it in their own career environment and say, right, you need to understand what is happening in our hyper-connected world. Why are we, they understand it's a digital world. What they don't understand is the basic building blocks of that digital world. And that's part of that curiosity. We've got to re-engage them, and we've got to make sure that they understand why they're doing it. So every citizen should have access to free, ongoing awareness training, so they can just tap into it when they do. Yeah, we've got to start looking at how governments will fund future higher education.
And we already see that many governments dedicate funds, big funds, to helping people turn from other type of industries to cyber industry. So maybe within that fund, or as an extension of that fund, is somewhere where your idea lies. That, and I agree, if we want to make it nationwide, it shouldn't be dependent on your ability to pay for these kind of trainings. It should be something that's accessible for everyone on a certain basic level, and then based on their role, they'll probably get more education on that. But there needs to be a certain level where everyone meet to kind of align, because right now we don't have that alignment. Each person have a different access, a different level, a different ability to pay for different training. And unless you have that ability or have that interest because of your work or the environment that you're in, you can't get that education, or you don't want to get that education. And maybe it's something that is a government plan with certain benefits that come to those who take this training, because at the end of the day, we all need a bit of motivation. It sounds like something that is related to what you have in mind, I think.
Yeah, I came across a really interesting, I'm not going to say open source because it's not, but Cyber Mentor Dojo, which a guy called JJ, I think his last name's Davis, if I remember. He's kind of set this up. He's been bouncing around in the, I'm going to say, the cyber world, gone back into his SOC roots, but he set this thing up where people like ourselves who have some experience in the cyber world can become mentors for people who are trying to break in. It's not a paid service. Everyone gives their time freely, and I think we'll see a lot more of that as people, maybe my bosses, for example, and people like myself, realize there are people banging on the door. It's not that it's not cool and it's not interesting. There are people who want to get in and can't get in. So despite the shortage, right, and despite the fact that people are taking courses and have that piece of paper that says, hey, I'm a certified ethical hacker, or whatever it might be, they actually can't get into the industry for whatever reason. And I think that this particular one is just one of a few that we'll see some more of, where people are given that community, as it were, to help them get in and to start spreading out the knowledge around cyber from grassroots all the way through to the seasoned professionals.
Yeah. Hey, let's move. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you that as well. I think online mentoring is essential.
Okay, I just wanted to ask one last question before we move to the attendees' questions. Some studies show that there will be among 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs until 2025, and that most cybersecurity professionals lack experience against real-life attacks. How could this be fixed? I mean, how can academia train future professionals to be ready for such requirements? And we're not talking only about cybersecurity awareness from young ages. We're talking about specific technical skills.
So I can share from what we have in Checkpoint, and I know some vendors have that as well, is that we actually have a specific role, a specific person that focuses on our partnerships with academia. We have planned a program called Secure Academy. We understood several years ago that we have to help to get the audience educated. We have to get students the tool at a very young age. We want to give them an access while they're still in school. So when they finish school, when they graduate, they actually have these tools to go into the real world. It's something that is tangible and recognized in the industry. So with Secure Academy, we work with a huge variety of universities and NGOs all over the world, and provide them with checkpoint training materials for free. We train their instructors or their lecturers for free, and we basically waive every fee that we charge in order to help them get this, to get educated with this. They can use labs online, so it's scalable. It can be done remote. We're adding more and more content as we see that there is a need, and we understand that each organization also have different requests. And in the last year, we've also added much activity with NGOs, because we want to access also those who don't necessarily go to a higher education institute, or maybe do a career change in life, or maybe are still even students in high school and have the ability to learn this kind of stuff. So we wanted to make this content available for them. So we understand that universities, being research institutes many times, and colleges, and there's a lot of different organizations under the umbrella of higher education, but we understand that there is a lot of research there, and we think it's very, very important to bring in real world experience, real life experience, professional certification that is world recognized, so they can learn from the world, from what we have outside, and we can give them. We also provide them access to our research team, so they actually can hear what's the latest in research, what's the latest in field. Our teams go in and actually meet with students, explain to them about careers. We have some partnerships with creating connection between us as giving the content, students, and maybe future employers for them with our partners and customers. So we're really trying to help support this ecosystem. We understand that someone that graduates a degree might not have the relevant connections, all the skills they need, maybe some professional knowledge in terms of certification, and we want to help them start their first step outside of the academia with the best skills possible, with the best support. So we've been doing this for the last several years. We keep growing this, we keep investing in this, because we understand that this is the future. We have a huge gap in terms of workforce. All of us feel this across the industry, and we have to start young. College age is great. We're trying to go even before that. We're currently working on developing stuff around that as well, to go to work on high schools and even middle schools, but they need different access. As Dr. Christopher said, they need different type of information coming. They need something relevant for their focus and their age. So this is one of our focuses, and we think it's fascinating. We also bring content like Simpire's content into some of these institutes if it's possible. So we want to give them as much knowledge as possible. We understand that one person can do it alone. It's a kind of a team effort that needs to be done. But we want to help educational institutes to help to qualify their students the best way possible.
So one of the areas we're looking at is a blended learning environment. At the end of the day, we still need people to understand what a cyber operations center can do and how it do it. We need to create immersive labs. We need to sync them into that space. Two reasons for that. First and foremost, they need to work as a team. That's about the working environment in any business. It's team play. And the second thing, which is equally important, is that if we are hitting them with a cyber attack regime, we don't want to bring their environment down. So we've got to create those sandbox environments where they can happen. When I first set up the cybersecurity unit in Bournemouth University, the first thing I got was a complete red, blue, purple environment, 3 classrooms, which anybody who knows about universities, that took quite a bit of a challenge to take over 3 seminar rooms to convert them into a cyber lab that was isolated from the rest of the university. So it can be done. And once it happens, all sorts of things happen. We created a student union who went off and doing hackathons around the world and captured the flag and all sorts of other things. So the students, once they got into this immersive environment, suddenly found there was other immersive environments in other parts of the world where they could go and cross-pollinate their ideas and their skill sets. So it is a growing space of immersive labs in universities. But that's for a very select few. We got a bigger audience to deal with now. So in 2010, I had 200 students. Today, I'm looking anywhere between 2,000 and 20,000 students need to understand cyber in the next year, and the year after, and the year after. And it's going to be a growing number of students going to have to understand this, because corporates want better skilled employees. Institutions want better enablers in their environments. Schools want better teachers in this space. And ultimately, citizens want to protect their own family environment. So there is a whole host of demands on the education capabilities of what the world can deliver today and what it needs to deliver in the next 5 years. And it costs, and there isn't the money for it. As we all just gone out of a pandemic, that's cost a lot of countries an awful lot of money. So there is issues about where are our long-term societal priorities, and the United Nations say, education is number 4. It is that important. So we've got to find out how we can make our governments, and the ones that are moving very well. Others are a little bit slower, and we've got to get better at this. And we've got to change how we deliver it as well. Compared to the idea that there's 3.2 million vacant jobs, the larger number of that is Asia Pacific, it's APAC. We're looking at Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand. We're talking where a large part of the world's population is. And yet they're the ones with the greatest demand today for cybersecurity. So yeah, we've got to get involved in the universities and the colleges in the APAC region. And that doesn't discount the vast need for security professionals in America. North America produces the largest number of security professionals each year, and yet they still have vacant jobs, and a lot of them. That says something about maybe we need to think better. And Africa is growing. There's a lot of Africans who want to get into cybersecurity because they know it's a way of getting out of their environment as it is into a global market. And they know the skills they've got are needed. I see an awful lot of South Africans these days in cybersecurity, as I'm beginning to see a lot of Filipinos. The market is truly global and it's connected. And that's the thing about cyber. You don't have to be living in the United States to do a US job. Today, and we've proved it for the last 2 years with COVID, you can do it online, and you can do it well online. The productivity in many jobs has actually increased because of the online environment. So yeah, it's something we need to start thinking about.
And well, thank you very much for having the time to answer this set of questions. While our attendees might share their own doubts and questions over the chat here or by raising their hand, I will allow them to speak openly. I have one question. Usually cyber criminals are always way ahead of cyber defenses. That's the way they begin their lives, or that's the way they want to create the damage they create. Being more sophisticated with more elaborated attacks, how can people be educated or trained to be ready for such a situation? I mean, how can you encourage people to become cybersecurity responders or cybersecurity specialists when cyber criminals look like they're always way ahead of us?
I think it's a bit of scaremongering. Also, some truth to it. It's a little bit of scaremongering there. The let's call them the threat actors for want of better terminology right here. They have no rule book to play by, right? There really isn't any boundaries to what they can do. Not that necessarily we're looking at a set of serious hardened criminals. There is a certain element which is now organized crime, which is part of this cybercrime that we're seeing, and for a minute we'll put that to the side. You have this set of people who are, by their own admission, very curious. And that's where a lot of it does come from, the curiosity. If you go back to the days of Kevin Mitnick, sorry for dredging up history, but if you go back to that, that's how Kevin Mitnick was. A very, very curious, very intelligent, a very sociable animal, and was able to use his, back then, probably very unique skill set, less so today, there's a lot of people like that, to pour the water on the fires of his curiosity and get what he wanted. There'll always be people who can do that, right? So they're going to be out there. We can't predict. I think Chris mentioned it. We don't know what the challenges are going to be the next 5 years or 10 years. But if you want to be part of the global world and the online world, the safe online world, you can be part of it or choose to ignore it. Or in fact, you can choose to become part of the curious nature, which isn't always a bad thing. And it can actually lead you to some very interesting cybersecurity careers as well. So I know it's not a real answer to your question, but I think the question was a little bit too scary to leave just like that. And I'd like to leave that question open to my colleagues here who are probably more equipped to answer than I am.
Well, crime has always been there. So, it's a percentage of the risk of doing business. There's always somebody who's got some form of criminal intent. And maybe not even initially, they saw it as a criminality. Fraud is fraud. At the end of the day, it's a crime, but it happens all the time. Slicing off the top, or I'll just take my little small margin out of this process as well. It's if the opportunity presents itself, people will take the opportunity. That's always been the case. Whether it then goes into criminality and they become hardcore members of an organized crime is a different ballgame. That's a career path they chose to take, and we got to educate them back into the real world again. So I've been dealing with policing, and I've been dealing with so-called hackers who, 15-year-olds who suddenly find himself swimming around some corporate account because he's some found back door into that account, and he's suddenly found this could be interesting. It encourages them to go, and they go on their chat room, and other people encourage them, and all of a sudden it becomes a big issue. Curiosity is a driver for that. But a lot of those hackers are our next generation analysts, and we got to, if a 15-year-old has got a criminal record for hacking, because they usually get caught, then does that mean we have to stop them becoming part of the defensive community of using their skill sets that they already learned, but to change their attitude? And I think this is a big thing about when we start looking at the job roles. A cybersecurity analyst is not badly paid. Compared to the average job out there, we're talking about at least twice the amount of the average payment for a basic analyst. So get the skills, get the knowledge, get into the job roles, and then all of a sudden they're in big payments. I've got a SOC specialist is earning £1,000 a day, and he's not doing an awful lot for that money. So there is money in being on the right side of the fence rather than the wrong side. And I think a lot of people are beginning to realize that as well. Corporations are beginning to see that to retain their staff, they've got to pay them better. And that's also getting in part of the problem. What they're doing now is poaching from one company to the next. So the same individual's going around 4 or 5 companies in 1 year and increasing his salary because the demand for it is too high. What we've got to do is get a better leveling of more people into the industry to reduce this current merry-go-round of people moving from one job to another. I've got thousands of students, and it's amazing on my LinkedIn how many times they've changed their roles. It used to be every 2 years. it's getting down to every 2 months at this very moment, because everybody wants a cybersecurity job and they're offering all sorts of packages. So
Chris, you mentioned there that the problem that I was talking about earlier, that employers aren't keen to take someone without relevant experience. And
that's right.
That's our whole circle back to the beginning again.
Yeah.
How do we get to the crux of this matter? But we're running out of time for that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, as I say, I think this is the risk factor. You know, if you want a good person, and it's going to be young and they're going to be inexperienced, and you've got to be able to invest in your new employee. That's the key to the whole thing. Realize that learning and development of your staff is part of your business environment. If you don't keep your staff engaged and encourage them to develop their skills, you're going to lose them because somebody else will.
100%.
So sorry, I was muted. I was just writing on the chat the link to join the next session. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you very much, Dr. Christopher. Thank you very much, Mark, for your time, for sharing your thoughts with us. And I hope to see you guys soon, even in person, once this situation is over.
Yeah.
So we can have another session.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here with us. And everyone who wants to join to our live demo, please do by clicking on the link that I've shared on the chat, or just go to your email and click on the second link on that email. Thank you very much, everyone.